As she gets deeper into the tunnels, a tremor shakes the floor and knocks her to the ground, and she suddenly finds herself in a trance, and she feels the heat radiating from the lava, but she knows that has nothing to do with her condition. She calls out, asking if he is here. Shirufei answers, telling her that he's been waiting, as Sonnia loses consciousness. What's up everybody, Jeff here, and we're back for some more Malifaux lore guide. This time around, we're going to be talking about Sonnia Criid from the Guild. So spoilers incoming for all of Sonnia's stories, and there'll be a list in the description of all the stories mentioned so you can check them out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe. There's also a link in the description for the Discord if you want to come over and have a chat about what you think about Sonnia, and there's a link to the Patreon as well. Check it out and consider contributing to help support the channel. And now, let's get into Sonnia. A metal construct bursts into a high-class train car, followed by his controller. The rich passengers are surprised, and after the construct smashes through the door to the next car, 2 guild guards approach. The man shoots electricity at them, subduing them both, and then kisses one of the passengers named Julia before following the construct into the next car. When he gets there, the construct has already taken out 2 guards and is working on cracking a safe. They prime some explosives and set them off, but instead of opening the safe, it blows a hole in the side of the train and launches the safe out. Soulstones spill out everywhere, and the man curses to himself before collecting as many as he can in a bag. Soon, shots begin ringing out, and the construct moves to cover his master. The 6th shot finds its mark, hitting the soulstone that powers the construct, and it collapses to the ground in a heap. The man looks up and recognizes Samael Hopkins, the famed witch hunter, and immediately tries to shoot electricity at him. It fizzles out, being absorbed into a pendant that's around Samael's neck that was designed specifically to counter his magic. The man realizes he's defeated and tells Samael that he won't take him alive. As the witch hunter closes in to finish him off, the man closes his eyes, but then hears a whack, and opens them to see that Julia has picked up a piece of the construct and knocked Samael over the head. They embrace each other and then jump off the train to make their escape. The man dreams about overthrowing the Governor General and reigning over all of Malifaux, collecting great wealth and an army of constructs to do his bidding. A mob of people come, bearing torches, and begin to burn down the city, filling the area with smoke. The man wakes up and realizes that the smoke is real, as his house is on fire. He scrambles to get outside, and bumps into Sonnia Criid, who's bearing her sword. He looks next to her, and sees Samael Hopkins holding Julia, his hand over her mouth. He wakes up again, and finds himself shackled in a room, with the floor covered in runes. He sees a woman standing in the corner, and instinctively tries to lash out with his magic, but instead of manifesting electricity, it fills him with a horrible pain, and a feeling of burning from the inside out. As he suffers, Sonnia Criid takes a puff of her cigarette, and tells him that when he's ready, they can have a conversation. The man struggles to compose himself, and stands to face her, and just as he's about to talk, she flicks her cigarette butt in his face, and tells him that he's stupid, and that they're not here to talk. He again tries to lash out at her with his abilities, but the electricity shoots down his shackles, illuminating the runes on the ground, and the power is then sent back up the shackles to burn him again. Sonnia tells him that that feeling is his powers being burned away, and it'll soon be replaced with a sensitivity to the magic of other criminals like him. She tells him that his jealousy for their abilities will cause him to want to help her seek them out, to punish his former comrades, and he's even going to enjoy it. The man feels his whole self being burned away, leaving nothing but hatred and anger. As his body shrivels and his skin wrinkles, Sonnia throws a large sword at his feet and tells him that he is to call her master and that this is his weapon. The man responds, "Yes, master." Sonnia Criid considers her duties as the head of the Witch Hunters Task Force to be an extension of her own personal ambitions. She views the Guild's old-fashioned methods as obsolete, and this makes her the perfect person to hunt down the Arcanist threat. On the surface, the Miners and Steamfitters Union seems like a legitimate workers' organization, but in reality it's a front for the Arcanist terrorists. While the other guild leaders are able to openly confront their enemies, the Union cleverly manipulates public opinion, and so Sonnia has to be more careful about how she operates. The workers in the mines are caught in a struggle between the Guild and the Union, and Sonnia Criid has gotten good at playing the game of sabotage and subterfuge. Leviticus goes to the Guild Enclave and enters Sonnia Criid's office. She tells him that he's late, and he responds that he doesn't like to take a carriage because he likes to walk the city at night. Sonnia asks him about the woman and the sword, and Leviticus confirms that she arrived in Malifaux just as Sonnia's sources had told her. He also confirms that she's carrying an oriental sword that matches the description that the sources indicated, and he believes it's the Masamune. He adds that Alice is following the woman now. Sonnia tells him that he better make sure she doesn't lose her sword, and Leviticus replies that Alice is very capable. Leviticus asks her what her interest is in the sword, and Sonnia leads him to a locked room where she pulls out fancy-looking scrolls that have Japanese writing on them. She tells Leviticus that the Ortegas found these in the possession of gremlins in the bayou, and Leviticus is surprised, mentioning that the gremlins are barely sentient, and he can't imagine what interest they would have in them. Sonnia tells him that's why she's so curious, and she explains that they tell a story of a man who got his hands on a Masamune sword, and used it to fight off demons that were infesting his province. The images on the scrolls show the wielder of the sword slashing at his possessed enemies and cutting the demons inside in half, while leaving their hosts unharmed. Leviticus asks Sonnia if she believes the sword in Victoria's possession is the same one from the story. The woman says yes, and adds that she believes these scrolls were brought here when the first breach opened, and that some of the native inhabitants of Malifaux must have gotten their hands on them, learned to understand them, and then reached out to Victoria and summoned her here. Leviticus considers what she's saying for a moment, wondering if a Masamune sword could be found so easily, and then asks Sonnia why she didn't tell him all of this before he sent Alice after the girl. Sonnia responds that he did say she was very capable. Sonnia rides towards Ridley Station, and then dismounts her horse, and meets with Samael Hopkins. She asks him for his report, and he tells her that Rasputina just left the Hollow Point Station, where she likely met with Ramos. Sonnia says that they have to get her here, because if she's right that Rasputina is in league with some ancient evil, she can't be allowed to fall in with the Arcanists. She looks down at the station below, and then asks what the hell the Death Marshals are doing here. She tells Hopkins to raise Lady Justice on the Ethervox. At the station, the judge and the marshals set up to confront Seamus, who pulls up in a train and attacks with a horde of zombies. As the two forces clash, Seamus shoots the judge in the chest, throwing him onto the floor. But then Rasputina appears, and she and Seamus begin to go at it as well. Criid sees Seamus wielding a flamethrower that shoots green flames, and she wonders how he got a hold of such a device. She hears static over the Ethervox, and Hopkins tells her that Lady Justice wants her to engage. She yells back to the woman that the two criminals are tearing each other apart, and that they should wait until the dust settles, and then pick off whoever's left. Justice yells back that the judge is down and the marshals are overwhelmed, and that Seamus and Rasputina have no reason to fight, and will likely break off their attacks and both escape. She emphasizes that Seamus killed a whole train car full of laborers. Sonnia reluctantly agrees and draws her sword. Back on the platform, Lady Justice approaches and rallies the Death Marshals to confront Seamus. His flamethrower had been disabled, and he takes cover as he tries to fend off both Rasputina and Justice. As Rasputina is distracted, Sonnia Criid sneaks up on her and engulfs her in a pillar of flame. Rasputina tries to run, but doesn't make it far, before the judge stumbles to his feet, badly bleeding from his injury, and manages to tackle her. This gives Hopkins an opening, and he charges in, throwing a bear trap at her, which clamps to her leg and knocks her on the ground. They announce to Lady Justice that the witch has been caught, as she closes in on Seamus, who seems to be out of tricks. They question Seamus, and then Lady Justice and Sonnia argue over whether to head to Kythera or whether they should bring the prisoners back to the city. Molly speaks up and tells Lady Justice that at Kythera they could banish undeath from this world permanently and finally allow her to die. At this, Lady Justice decides that they will head to the ruins. As they all travel to Kythera, Sonnia Criid pores over the diary of Philip Toomers that Samael had pulled off of Rasputina. Toomers was the only survivor of the first expedition to Kythera, and was now a reanimated disembodied head. When they get off the boat at the ruins, she sees the evidence of a long-extinct civilization and recognizes some of the carvings from the Doer's library. She tells Lady Justice that she's confident she can decipher them, and this journal will be the key. Sonnia and Lady Justice bring Rasputina forward, as Sonnia studies some of the glyphs to try to figure out what words need to be spoken to finish closing the structure and cutting off the source of necromantic magic. A storm brews overhead, as Sonnia hands Rasputina a note with the correct words written on it and tells her to speak them aloud. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind shoots down on Rasputina, knocking all the guild officials away, and she breaks out of her shackles and then reads the words off the paper. Seamus yells out to her that he will kill her, and soon the tyrant December manifests itself as a hulking creature. It begins attacking the guild personnel, and Sonnia slashes it with her blade, but none of their attacks seem to have any effect. The creature bats her aside, and Lady Justice tries the same, but it is also able to ward her off. Then a strange swordswoman appears and attacks the creature, but he picks her up and squeezes her in his claws. Then an almost identical version of the woman appears and jumps down off a walkway, slashing her blade through December's body, and as she hits the ground, the tyrant collapses. The guild members regroup themselves and recover Rasputina, who was knocked unconscious, binding her arms and legs again. In their confusion, they fail to keep an eye on Seamus, who had freed himself from his captors, and is now speaking the words to reopen Kythera. The massive structure begins to shake, and a portal in the middle of the swamp begins to open. Lady Justice and Sonnia don't know what to do, as they see a creature begin to try to make its way through the portal and into this world. Seamus cackles with ecstasy as he's witnessing the end of the world, but suddenly a massive metal construct approaches, firing cannons at the structure and the creature trying to make its way through the portal. The weapons have no effect on the creature, but they do damage the structure, and soon the portal collapses and the creature disappears. Sonnia and Samael ride down a path with a few guards, and Sonnia reads out of Philip's journal. Samael notices and comments that she's had her nose buried in that book for months, and asks what could be so interesting. She replies that she's been reading about Philip's experiences at Kythera, and that if he's right, the portal that they opened almost let death itself into the world. Samael replies that the people really don't know how close it came, and that they're lucky to have their protection. Sonnia tells him that something big is coming, and that they'll need people around them that they can trust. She asks if he's sure he wants to be part of it. He confirms, and tells her that he doesn't think they're going to see the Ortegas just to deliver them their custom bullets. Sonnia agrees, and explains that they need allies, and that the Ortega's morality is a bit more flexible than Lady Justice. They start to approach Latigo, the compound that the Ortegas built near the Badlands and the bayou. Suddenly, Samael motions for the rest of them to stop, and he pauses to listen. After a few seconds, he disappears into the forest, and Sonnia waits. She hears footsteps approaching, expecting to see him return, but instead a giant Nephilim bursts out from the tree line and attacks the guards. They are surprised and unable to fight back, and one of the guards is killed as another one flees. Samael emerges and tells Sonnia to run, and the two of them make a break towards Latigo. The Nephilim give chase, and as they get closer to the compound, Sonnia sees a man, Santiago Ortega, and he unloads at the Nephilim with his 2 pistols. He joins them, and tells Sonnia that she's not supposed to come unannounced, and she shoots back not now, as they rush to get inside the compound. Once they reach safety, Francisco Ortega joins them, and Sonnia thanks them for their help, but Santiago continues scolding her, and complains that she risked her people's lives. She tells him to watch himself, and he's about to continue when they hear another voice yelling for him to stand down. Abuela Ortega emerges and fires her shotgun in the air, telling Santiago that the second shot is for any backtalk, and that he is to get inside and set the table for 2 more guests. Santiago storms off, and Samael thanks her for her hospitality. They go inside and join the large family for a meal, as everyone tells stories about their exploits and monsters they've hunted. Perdita is quiet through the meal, until they are done eating when she asks the family to give her and the witch hunters some privacy. Sonnia is impressed when the entire family respects her command and leaves the room. She asks them why they're here, and Sonnia tells her that first she has a gift. Samael produces a small wooden box and opens it to reveal 20 magic bullets, created specifically for hunting Nephilim. Perdita nods, but doesn't say anything, so Sonnia goes on, explaining that she knows Perdita is headed into the bayou, and she wants the woman to find any artifacts with a symbol of an eye with a serpent wrapped around it. She explains that her research has revealed that this symbol is associated with something ancient that may unlock something very powerful, but could also be dangerous. Perdita thinks for a minute, and then quickly loads one of the bullets into her pistol, and fires it at a wooden beam. Smoke emerges from the hole, and Sonnia explains not to touch it, as it will burn you like acid. Perdita confirms what Sonnia wants her to do, and tells her that she'll do it in exchange for 100 more bullets like these. Samael objects, saying that's crazy, as she has no idea what goes into making them. But Sonnia interrupts him, and agrees to provide 100 more. Suddenly, Abuela speaks up from the doorway, telling them that they're all going to get themselves killed. Samael stands watch at the entrance of an old abandoned library in the Badlands. Inside, Sonnia Criid pores over books and takes notes about the ancient inhabitants of Malifaux and their obsession with the night sky. She reads about the tyrants, godlike entities of great power. They were ultimately overthrown when the portal at Kythera was built, but it allowed the essence of death to infect the world and twist the native inhabitants. The books mention a red star that appeared in the sky, right at the end of the ancient civilization. One of these tyrants is represented by an eye with a serpent wrapped around it, and it's also associated with the red star. As she continues her work, Samael looks up in the sky and asks Criid what's going on. She joins him, and they both see a red star streaking through the sky that looks like it's going to crash down into the bayou. Sonnia says that she doesn't know, but tells Hopkins that if it all goes bad, then it was an honor serving with him. As the red cage falls, a purple wave of energy washes over all of Malifaux, and Sonnia Criid, being one of the few people who had any understanding of what was coming, had hoped she could stop it. As the wave hits her, she feels a surge of energy build up within her that she's unable to resist. She's suddenly engulfed in flames, a horrible pain burning inside her, and Hopkins, who's also stricken with pain, struggles to get away from her. Moments before the event took place, Sonnia had happened upon information about the tyrant Sharufe. He had not wanted to conquer, but had sought to destroy. It was foretold that he would smolder in the necropolis before finding a city dweller that he could use to rid himself of his shackles. Sonnia looks at the blurry and abstract image, and it looks just like her. When the event takes place, and she's consumed with fire, her body rises up, and she begins flying across the landscape, burning everything in her path. Samael looks up, and he can almost make out the image of a head in the conflagration, watching Sonnia do its bidding. Sonnia and Samael ride back to the town of Redemption and see one of the buildings is on fire. Sonnia tells him that she didn't do it, as he always tends to assume that if there's a fire, then she was the one who set it. Samael comments that he didn't think the volcanic activity would make it this far, and when they get back to the city, they eventually regroup at the general store that Sonnia has converted into a makeshift study. Samael reports that the building collapsed, and he asks if there's anyone left in the town, and Sonnia tells him that everyone has evacuated. Hopkins tells her that he was able to find a cave, which was an entrance to a labyrinth, and he looked around a bit, but he didn't go far, just like she asked, though he suspects he could have found his way back. Sonnia tells him that she's not worried about him getting lost naturally, and comments that there should have been markings or writing to mark the cave. Hopkins confirms and tells her that he found quite a bit, but that it didn't seem entirely Neverborn. He adds that some of the markings were scratched out and written over. Sonnia curses, and he hands her drawings that he made of the markings, and tells her that some of them match the markings from the books that she had him retrieve. She tells him that he didn't even get the book she needed the most, and he responds that he was almost caught by Lucius snooping around the offices, and the man followed him and then gave the book in question to Hoffman. Sonnia tells him that they can't trust any of them anymore, not even the Governor General. Hopkins states that he didn't copy down all of the graffiti because some of it was not fit for a lady's eyes. Sonnia shoots back that she's heard it all after apprehending all of the felons that they've captured. She starts reading a poem about a streetwalker brood and tells Samael that it seems like it was written by Seamus. Hopkins confirms and says that one of the raunchier poems was even signed with his name. Criid tells him that she's got a mission for him, and Hopkins notices that her demeanor has changed, and she speaks regretfully, as if they're saying goodbye. She tells him that she needs him to retrieve the book from Hoffman because it's about grafting, and she must have missed something. They agree to meet back at her safe house in the quarantine zone, since this town likely won't be here when they get back. Samael rides out, headed towards the city, but after a while he decides to turn around and go back to the general store. He finds it abandoned, with some supplies and books missing, and then he finds a note written by Sonnia. It says that she knew he was terrible at following orders, and that she wants him to take over the witch hunters, as she expects that she'll soon either be dead, or she'll have pissed off one of the most powerful tyrants. Either way, she intends to buy them time, so they can figure out how to defeat them. She adds a note that Lucius Matheson is more than he seems. Samael goes back to his horse, riding for the city, intending to retrieve the book and to find Seamus. Sonnia sees dark clouds swirling around a mountain in the distance. There's a flash of light, and suddenly all the air is sucked towards the mountain. She takes this as a bad omen as she approaches the cave entrance. After examining some of the symbols, the witch hunter finds lewd pictures among the graffiti written by Seamus, and she laughs at the thought that Samael had protected her from this. She begins examining the writing, finding some symbols that were not included in Samael's report. They give her some more detail about what's to come, but overall they just reinforce what she already knew. She makes her way deeper inside, until she comes to the underground labyrinth filled with rivers of lava and scorched stone. Sonnia thinks about the many books she's read, written in a language not even known to the Neverborn, and yet she seems to instinctively understand. This is how she learned of Shirufei, the worst of all the tyrants, who was trapped in the red cage after bringing destruction to this world. She also considers how she seems to have been drawn to this place, as well as many other key locations, and how Seamus always seemed to be one step ahead of her, seemingly connected to the ancient places as well. As she gets deeper into the tunnels, a tremor shakes the floor and knocks her to the ground, and she suddenly finds herself in a trance, and she feels the heat radiating from the lava, but she knows that has nothing to do with her condition. She calls out, asking if he is here. Shirufei answers, telling her that he's been waiting, as Sonnia loses consciousness. She wakes up sometime later, finding that she's been moved, and she thinks about how ironic it is that her investigation has brought her all over Malifaux, far away from the city, and yet now she's making her way right back towards it. As she thinks about all the places that she had visited to try to find the clues to this mystery, she realizes that they were not actually in random places, but their locations made a ring centered around the city. It occurs to her that some of the links in the ring were missing, and she regrets not knowing what information she might have missed. As she continues to ponder all of this, she suddenly realizes that the ring is not centered around the city, but slightly north of the city. It's centered on the breach. Eventually, she finds herself in a large open chamber that's located underground directly below the breach. She calls out to tell Shirufei that she's here, and after waiting in silence, she curses and tells him that he must have a sense of humor. She realizes that she's now in the necropolis, a vast structure beneath the city that holds dark secrets. Criid sits down and looks at her sword, and realizes that it all started with this weapon. The sword was extremely heavy, but to her it felt light as a feather, and to others it felt cold to the touch, but to her it felt warm. She couldn't even remember if her mastery of fire came before or after she got the sword. Suddenly, a large reptilian creature rises out of one of the pools of lava. She looks at it and tells him that he has physical form, and asks what it could want with her. It replies nothing, as it reaches one of its arms out, and Sonnia states that it doesn't want her. It wants her sword. Shirufei replies that it was never hers. Sonnia realizes that all of the other tyrants needed a vessel in order to take physical form and become more powerful. But Shirufei, it seems, only needed her to deliver him the key that would break the final lock and allow him to ascend. The sword was the key. She tells him that if he wants the sword, he'll have to take it from her, as she picks it up and slashes at the outstretched arm, cutting it off easily. It tries to attack with its other arm, but she impales the palm of his hand with her sword. Sonnia then realizes that the blade is not the key to his ascendance, but a tool to keep him at bay. In her hesitation, the tyrant uses the opportunity to swipe at her with the other arm, smashing into her body, breaking bones, and sending her sword flying. The tyrant goes to retrieve the sword, but Sonnia heals herself with a soul stone and goes after it herself. Chirufeh summons a wall of fire, but Sonnia uses her own flames to cut through his and get past the wall. He then raises a wave of lava out of the nearby pool, and it comes crashing down on her. She uses her own flames to deflect the lava just in time, but it pours down on the sword. Sonnia has a unique ability to see the threads of fate, and she watches as the tyrant twists the threads to cause the rock beneath the sword to buckle, pushing the weapon towards him. Sonnia then realizes that the tyrants can't be at full strength without a physical avatar. She had been wrong. The sword was not the key. She was. Sonnia leaps in the air towards the sword, using her connection with the blade to cut off the tyrant's influence as he struggles to stop her. She collides with the blade in midair, and it pierces into her chest, cutting through flesh and bone. Chirufeh howls as Sonnia and the sword fall into a pool of lava. Outside, an earthquake shakes the ground, causing buildings to collapse and killing people in the city. Samael Hopkins makes his way to the cave entrance and down into the labyrinth. Eventually, he finds Sonnia Criid kneeling on the ground, her legs stuck into the black rocks that used to be a pool of lava, and her sword impaling her through the chest. Hopkins knew that Sonnia had to face Chirufeh, but he wished that he could have been there, even though he would have failed to save her. He approaches the body, intending to bury her in rocks, since he won't be able to remove her from the lava. He grabs the sword and pulls it free from her body, and suddenly Sonnia gasps and opens her eyes wide. She calls out to him to get back. Suddenly, the rocks around her turn back into lava and start expanding out in a circle as Hopkins runs for safety. Sonnia's body is lifted up in the air and bursts into flames as lava drips from her open wound like blood. She speaks in an unnatural voice and tells him that he's a fool and he should have left her dead. Suddenly, fire begins pouring out of her mouth as she flies towards Hopkins, too quickly for him to get out of the way. He lifts the sword over his head and the fire pours down on it, but protects Hopkins from any damage. Sonnia flies down one of the tunnels, a serpent of fire left trailing in her path. Hopkins realizes that he's let the tyrant loose to destroy this world, and possibly even others. He hefts the sword, deciding that he has to go after her, but dreading going further into the necropolis. Perdita Ortega confronts Sonnia, who is possessed by Chirufeh, in the necropolis under the city. As Chirufeh taunts her, Perdita takes cover and then notices Samael Hopkins' body laying on the ground. Francisco and Santiago Ortega approach, as Perdita calls to Samael, stirring him from his unconsciousness, and then tosses him a bag. He removes an ornate silver steel mask from the bag as Chirufeh approaches. He doesn't like what he has to do, but he knows that it's what Sonnia would want. Later, Francisco, Santiago, and the rest of the Ortegas regroup outside, having been forced away by the battle. Santiago comments that Perdita should have been back by now, and Francisco is almost ready to give up before they hear her voice. She and Samael are carrying Sonnia, who now has a metal mask over her face. They ask what happened, and Perdita tells them that they'll never speak of it, and suggests that they all head home. Samael and Sonnia go out drinking, and Sonnia gets very drunk. After helping her get home, Samael worries that Chirufeh is winning the struggle against her, as her behavior is becoming more and more erratic. He wakes her the next morning and tells her that some silent ones are gathering in the quarantine zone, and they both head out. On the way, he asks her if she can sense the being inside her, and she responds that she feels him in her head trying to get out, and that he never sleeps. Samael asks if that's why she drinks, and she replies that it used to help. They continue walking, and Sonnia tells him that they don't trust her. Samael knows that she's talking about the other members of the guild, who think that she is tainted somehow. He responds that he doesn't care, and she tells him that that's good to know. Suddenly, a snowdrift explodes, and icy shards pelt them. Sonnia sees a silent one running away, and she gives chase. Samael tries to keep up, but she outruns him, and he tries to call out to her that it's a trap, but his voice cuts off suddenly. She rushes headlong into a courtyard, and suddenly senses danger, as Rasputina, who's up in a building, shoots icy wind down at her. She deploys a fiery shield just in time, and maintains it as the witch keeps up her assault. Her silent ones appear and begin contributing to the attack, but Sonnia, with the power of Chirufeh, is able to withstand it. Next, ice gamen begin assaulting her, slashing at her body as well as her mask. Up in the building, Samael sneaks behind Rasputina and kicks her off the ledge. He approaches the woman as she fights off the last of the gamen, but one of them managed to grab hold of the mask and knock it off. Samael sees a surprised look on Sonnia's face as her eyes go black, and then the courtyard explodes in a fireball. Not wanting to leave his boss and companion behind, Samael recovers the mask and then fights his way through the Inferno to put it back where it belongs. Sonnia is struggling and suffering in the Inferno, but she suddenly feels something push against her face. As the pain goes away, she hears Samael's voice and opens her eyes to see him sitting on her chest, holding the mask down. She tells him to get up and then asks where Rasputina went. He responds that she ran off, but that they probably haven't seen the last of her. Sonnia says that she should have seen the ambush coming and realizes how close Cherufe was to escaping, and Samael, sensing that she's feeling low, tells her that he loves what she's done with her hair. Sonnia tips back another shot as she sits in a quiet bar that had only gotten quieter and emptier since she had arrived. She looks down at the note she'd been reading, which purports to be from a dear friend who's in desperate need of her help. They ask her to meet them at a location in the quarantine zone, and there's no name on the signature, and Sonnia does not recognize the handwriting. She knows for sure it's a trap, but can't decide who she thinks might be setting it. It can't be Ramos because he's too subtle, and it can't be Marcus because he's too direct. It must be some Arcanist lieutenant, but she quickly decides that she doesn't care. She picks up the note and heads to the quarantine zone. After watching the building for a half hour, Criid is satisfied and decides to head inside. She finds the building pitch black, so she summons a flame to guide her way and heads deeper inside. Eventually, she makes it to a large room and sees a crate in the middle of the floor. As she looks around to try to get a sense of her surroundings, suddenly the top of the crate shoots off and a humanoid figure emerges. She makes ready for a fight and looks at the figure and recognizes red hair and a metal mask. She's looking at herself. As the doppelganger approaches, Sonnia realizes that it even moves like her, and that this can't be an Arcanist trick. It's something that she's never encountered before. There's a flash and a bang in the distance, and it distracts the imposter, so Sonnia uses the opening to attack it with fire. She senses Cherufe trying to exert his control, and fights him off while maintaining the attack. After a few moments, she lets up, and as the fire disperses, the imposter is completely unharmed. She realizes it must be fireproof, and draws her sword, deciding to do it the old-fashioned way. As the two clash, Sonnia realizes that the doppelganger matches her in speed and skill, but there's one big difference between them. It doesn't seem to be getting tired. It slashes at her with unnatural claws, and she notices that the crate has a mirrored interior. As she tries to decide how to defeat it, she realizes that it must be Neverborn, and wonders where Perdita is when you need her. As the fight goes on, she hears gunshots and sees flashes, but is unable to dwell on it as she fends off the attacker. She dodges a blow from the imposter, circles around it, and gets behind the crate. She kicks it so it tips over, and the doppelganger is staring directly into a mirror. Having nothing to imitate except its own false reflection, the facade fails, and its figure suddenly goes blurry. Sonnia takes the opportunity to impale it through the chest, and its body starts to shrivel and shrink. When Sonnia approaches the other side of the room, she finds herself even more confused, as she sees Lady Justice, as well as Perdita, and two other figures she doesn't recognize. No one seems to know what's going on, so Lady Justice suggests that they ask their mutual friend, and the robed figure complains that it wasn't supposed to end like this. Lady Justice pulls back the cowl, and all three women recognize the person's face. Sonnia remembers her as a woman who had asked to join up with the witch hunters and had followed Sonnia around, pestering her for days, asking her questions about every aspect of her job. Eventually, Sonnia had had enough and yelled at the woman, and she hadn't seen her since. Perdita asks what her story is, and the woman explains that she had a great life with a husband and children until all three of them came to her house and took it away from her. Sonnia remembered an operation where a corrupt guild official was selling secrets to the Arcanists, Resurrectionists, and even the Neverborn. Perdita, Sonnia, and Lady Justice were all sent, as they didn't know what kind of resistance to expect. They had gone in force and burned everything. The woman continues, explaining that her husband and her children are gone, and she snapped, unable to understand how they had not only gotten away with it, but were worshipped as heroes. Now she tried to get her revenge, but her plan had failed, and she asked for them to kill her. Perdita tries to comfort the woman, telling her that it's a matter of family, something she can appreciate. She tells her that they're not going to kill her, and she turns to Sonnia and Lady Justice, who look tense, and makes them promise to agree. Sonnia says that they won't kill her, and Perdita takes her word, stating that she has a long ride home, and then leaves. The woman looks up at Sonnia and Lady Justice and asks what she does now, and Sonnia asks if she still wants to be a witch hunter, as she has the perfect spot within her organization. Lady Justice doesn't like what she's implying, but figures that it's probably better than having a Resurrectionist sympathizer out on the streets. As part of a mission to maintain the current timeline, Zoraida projects herself into the body of a guild employee and seeks out Sonnia Criid. She finds the woman and is surprised to find her with Perdita Ortega and Lady Justice. She hands Sonnia a puzzle sphere and tells her that it activated the magic detectors and needs to be put in safe storage. Sonnia casually looks at it and then tells her that a boiler exploded earlier, so it'll have to go to basement 2. Zoraida agrees and walks away to carry out her plan. As the Governor General conducts his ritual to ascend, Sonnia Criid is in her office, and suddenly her mask begins to heat up, enough to burn her flesh. Then suddenly, Cherufe was free, and flames shoot out, burning the office, and the witchling handler she had just been speaking to. She feels the tyrant swelling with etheric energy, as she realizes that the world is ending. But then, something else happens. Cherufe's essence began to meld with the essence of another entity that was trying to ascend. Sonnia feels the tyrant, struggling to maintain his control over his corporeal vessel, as something pulls at him, and Sonnia senses a rare emotion in the tyrant: panic. In the blink of an eye, the tyrant's essence was removed from her body, but the torture she experienced felt like it took ages. She collapses to the ground, amid the charred remains of her office, and she sees her mask laying on the ground, deformed from the intense heat. Cherufe is gone, and that terrified her. Dr. McMorning visits Sonnia and tells her that he can help her repair her damaged face and body and manage the pain if she'll just sign a few requisition forms for him. She was preparing to sign before he'd finished the sentence, and the next day, McMorning had access to a new supply of Arcanist corpses. After eating through a straw through her mask for years, and then being in the hospital after the incident, Sonnia Criid was not used to eating solid food. As she chews her bagel, she accidentally bites her tongue anytime she lets her attention drift. When she moves her newly constructed face, it's painful, but McMorning told her that was a good sign, as it meant the flesh is healing, and all of the nerves had not been destroyed. Sonnia decides that it's going to be a good day, before Perdita walks in and greets her, and her eye twitches, causing even more pain. She hesitates, but tells her that she looks good, and Sonnia replies that the scars on her face are still healing since the incident with Cherufe. Perdita tells her that she likes her hair, which is short after being completely burned off, but the compliment comes off as rude and awkward. She tells Sonnia that it must feel good to have removed the mask, and asks if she kept it, and Sonnia asks her if she thinks she needs the mask. Perdita gets defensive, explaining that that's not what she meant, but that the mask is part of her legend. Sonnia shoots back that she probably needs it to not scare the children, and Perdita again tries to recover, adding that Sonnia has been scaring children since long before her face was burned off. Sonnia is shocked and offended, and as Perdita tries to explain, they are interrupted by Lady Justice. Her hair is also short, and Perdita compliments her, asking if she finally got sick of washing zombie guts out of it. Lady J explains that she cut it in solidarity with Sonnia, and Sonnia smiles and thanks her. Justice adds that everyone is happy to have her back, all except the judge, who had been cleaning up at their poker nights in Sonnia's absence. Perdita is surprised and asks if they have a poker night, and Sonnia says that it's not really a formal thing, just something they do once in a while. Lady J adds that it's every Thursday, and they've been doing it for several years now. Perdita's offended and asks why she wasn't invited, and Lady Justice tells her that she thought she knew, as Sonnia told her she was invited the first night. Perdita turns to Sonnia more offended, and tells her that she thought they were friends. Sonnia replies that they're more like co-workers, and Perdita asks if her and Lady Justice are friends though. Sonnia replies that Lady Justice doesn't think she looks horrible, and Perdita shoots back that that's because she's blind. Perdita storms out, cursing in Spanish, and the other two women sit quietly for a few minutes, before Lady Justice comments that Perdita might also not be glad that Sonnia's back. Sonnia brushes off the incident and then offers some breakfast to Lady Justice, but she refuses and tells the other woman that she's got to go sit for an interview under Governor General Marlowe's orders. Sonnia comments that it seems like a waste of time, since the Daily Record fabricates most of their stories anyway. Justice replies that the interview is not with the Daily Record, and Sonnia asks her who it's with then, before the realization hits her. Lady Justice sighs. After the Governor General makes a deal with Tony Ironsides, Sonnia is dispatched to the northern peaks to find Ramos, leader of the Arcanists. She makes her way to a particular cave, where she finds a team of men trying to dig something up, and Ramos among them. She calls out to him, and he turns to look at her, and tells her that he's surprised to see her, as she doesn't seem like the type to vacation in the snow. Sonnia shoots back that it's all business between the two of them, and declares that he's under arrest for terrorism with the Arcanists, and a series of other crimes. Ramos explains that she won't arrest him, as these claims are all propaganda, to tarnish his name and scare him, but she has no proof, and he does not scare easily. Sonnia points her sword at him and tells him that their game is up, as the guild now has someone willing to testify against him, guaranteeing they'll get a conviction. Ramos's confidence slips for a second, as he considers who among the Arcanists could have given him up. He thinks about Rasputina, Karis, and Ironsides, but is convinced they all hate the guild and are loyal to the organization. He steels himself and tells her that she can't arrest him, because if she does, the Miners and Steamfitters Union will shut down Soulstone production and starve the guild within a week, and that'll be the least of their problems with the riots. Sonnia shoots back that he has too much faith in the Union and asks him who he thinks led her here. Ramos assumes it's a bluff and tells Criid that she's outnumbered and that she should go crawling back to the Governor General and tell him that Ramos does not answer to him. Criid growls that he can tell him himself as the Witchling Stalkers begin to advance. Ramos launches an electrical attack at one of them as his shielding absorbs several bullets. he gets behind cover and begins relaying orders to his men to flank the stalkers. 2 of them are about to go, but another of the men stops them and tells them to remember their orders from the boss. This is not their fight. Ramos yells out that he's their boss, and the worker replies sadly, not anymore. Ramos suddenly realizes that it was Ironsides who'd betrayed him, and vows to get his revenge. Sonnia yells out that he has nowhere to run, and gives him her word that if he comes quietly, she'll make sure he doesn't get the death sentence, and she'll find the smallest cell possible for him to live the rest of his life. Ramos shoots back that she's the last person in the world he would trust at her word, and the guild official tells him that it seems he can't trust anyone. One of the witchling's bullets hits him in the arm and erupts in a bit of arcane fire. Ramos summons his strength and uses his ability to reconfigure some of the metal scraps of a damaged machine into an army of small spiders. The spiders attack the witchlings, but Sonnia continues advancing as she tries to take out the constructs. Ramos takes another bullet, and soon Sonnia is upon him, and she tells the man to please resist for old time's sake. Ramos shoots electricity at her and scurries out of the way, taking cover behind a broken down mining drill. He grabs a soulstone and begins channeling his power into the drill, transforming it into a many-limbed machine with blades and claws. Sonnia shoots a conflagration at him, and even though he's behind cover, the flames are able to wind around it and find their target. Ramos screams out in pain and falls on the floor, and as the flames keep coming, he loses consciousness while looking down at the depths of the lake. Sonnia approaches Ramos and uses her sword to remove his metallic arm from his body. She kicks it away from him and then uses a soulstone to stabilize him, just enough to keep him alive, but nothing more. She suddenly sees a flicker of movement and senses something alien, but somehow familiar. She quickly makes her way back towards the entrance and asks some of the workers what Ramos was looking to find in this cave. They tell her that it was just a soulstone, and she warns them not to linger in this place, and then orders her witchlings to collect Ramos's body so that they can leave as soon as possible. When the guild received reports of magical activity from occult Earthside, they sent Sonnia Criid to investigate. The mission led to the razing of an entire prison, and almost cost Sonnia her life. As she and the other survivors of her team returned Earthside, she felt a strange sensation when moving through the portal, as if it was trying to purge Criid's own magic, and replace it with something she found uncomfortably familiar. Most people were surprised when the Burning Man showed up in Malifaux. Sonnia was unmoved. She senses a twisted and warped presence in the chaos, and soon she hears a familiar voice, as she hefts her greatsword, and calls for her witchling stalkers. So that's it for Sonnia Criid. She's one of the few people who have survived being possessed by a tyrant, and only just barely. I feel like her and Rasputina and a few others need to start a support group, but I guess that probably wouldn't go over very good. It's going to be really interesting to see how she ties in with the Burning Man story, since she was connected to Shirufei for so long, and he's half of the Burning Man. She can obviously sense that, because when she came back to Malifaux after he showed up, she could sense a familiar presence. I'm sure she's going to be one of the people looking into how to deal with him, and I wonder if her experience with Shirufei is going to help out. And I wonder if her knowledge of the tyrants and her experience with Shirufei is going to help. And maybe Seamus will show up and help out again. Who knows? The most interesting part about Sonnia's story, though, is how she shows the really ruthless and cold-blooded nature of the guild. It's interesting that she always seems to be able to justify her actions to herself, but even in the narrative, it's well known that the people don't like her. I guess that's what you get when you torture people and execute families in the street. Drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think Sonnia is more of a defender of the people from a serious terrorist threat, or is she more a ruthless fascist? I'm curious what you all think. While you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out the link to the Discord, where we frequently debate about the moral virtues of characters like Sonnia, and check out the Patreon as well if you want to support the channel. And thanks for watching.